My next guests are Demetrius Matthews and Thomas Kling. Demetrius Matthews is the founder of Legacy Media, LLC. Demetrius had the vision to create something much bigger than himself. With one goal in mind, he developed Legacy Media, a platform that would allow him to create his own narrative and leave something behind that would withstand the test of time. Demetrius is a living example of how humble beginnings and rough adolescent years can transform into success and prosperity by being dedicated and working hard. His desire to leave his mark on the world, and by creating award-winning documentaries that touch the minds and hearts of many, is accomplishing what he's doing right now. In the West Side of Chicago, in the mid-'80s, Thomas Kling was a 33-year-old teacher who vowed to transform the lives of dozens of students lost in the pressure cooker of drugs and racism. His profound and lasting impact now shines in a documentary created by the very lives he saved. In the documentary, we also feel his pain as a white teacher ashamed of how the affluent have mentally, financially, and emotionally suppressed people of color in order to make themselves feel entitled. Demetrius describes his documentary as a love story between a teacher and his students. In watching it, you'll understand why he felt the need to make it. Welcome to the podcast, both of you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, I'll start off with the question I ask everybody, and we'll have Mr. Kling respond first. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
I didn't hear the end of that question. A time when I was in the trenches.
When you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out of the trenches.
In terms of my overall life or teaching?
Your teaching career, like a time that you really felt like it was difficult to move forward, but you were able to move forward eventually.
I've had a lot of those. To pinpoint one, not so many of them occurred when I was with Demetrius and the others. In fact, I can't think of a low point. I know that's hard to believe in 3 years with them, right? I think I would say when my father died in 91, he asked me, the night before he died, he asked me if we would keep my mom out of an institution. My mom lived to nearly 107. I know that's also hard to believe.
Yeah.
And it was important to him that she stay non-institutionalized. And it was important to me as much as it was for him. And over the years, when we kept her at home with Lewy body dementia, which is a terrible disease, we ran out of money. We ended up spending $2.5 million over 10 years. And I think one day in particular stands out. I had made a sign on a pole, and I have to admit, it was really beautifully made with a photo of my mom and the words something like, "Help keep my mom at home." And I would go mornings to expressway interchanges around Chicago and stand on exit ramps and entrance ramps and solicit funds for my mother's care. And I mean, this was really important to me. It became obsessive for me, all right? And one day I was at the top of a ramp in Northbrook on Lake Cook Road, and a car stopped, and they the guys in it seemed like they were going to give me money. And I've worn my Black Lives Matter button since Trayvon Martin back in, I believe, 12 down in Florida, right? They saw the button as I reached in to gather what I thought would be funds. And the one fiercely spat at me in my face. And that stands out as a really discouraging moment for me in terms of society, in terms of individual largesse. That was a bad time. And my mother ended up staying at home, living the rest of her life at home. We were able to somehow gather the money together. And she would die of COVID in the hospital. So ironic.
Yeah.
With her Lewy body dementia. We brought her last visit to the hospital in March of 2020. She had bilateral pneumonia, and the doctors told me at Glenbrook Hospital in Glenview, not far from here, they said, you can either keep her here or take her home. If you keep her here, this is right at the beginning of the COVID frenzy, right? We don't know where the COVID is. We know it's here. They said, if you take her home, she might survive the pneumonia. We don't know, And we kept her in the hospital, and that's where she died of COVID. 10 years after the saga, basically 10 years after the saga began. It's pretty incredible.
The incredible piece is you were able to keep her home, though, and get the funds eventually to take care of her at home.
It was a crusade. I was a sickly kid. I got sick from everything when I was a child. My mom, though stern, typically German, she was born in Stuttgart, was just the greatest caretaker I could have ever wanted. And I had to do what I did, There were no choices here at all, Yeah. So that was profound. It was profound, And then afterward, 7 weeks later, my first cousin, whom I had taken care of since my dad got sick in '88, I had taken care of Vaughn. He mentally ill, extremely mentally ill, extremely mental. I had taken care of him for 32 years until 2020. I was the only one he would allow to take care of him, and he was in an institution in Lincolnwood here. And 7 weeks after my mother passed, he passed away from the same illness. And I don't know, the two deaths still haunt me to an extent, because I could have taken him out of the senior citizens home where he died. 43 people on his floor had contracted COVID before Vaughn contracted it. And maybe half of them had died. And I couldn't get into the place because, everything was cordoned off, right? And, but I could have asked for him to leave.
Yeah.
In view of all of the sickness that was there already. I didn't. And he died too of COVID. And I don't know, I still blame myself to some extent for not getting him out,
Yeah.
I've had a good life, I've had as far as trenches and vicissitudes and all that stuff, I don't know them too well. I just don't. I will tell you, though, that, and I'll be emotional here, that the other guy in this tape, he himself was a high point in my life. I had him as a student for 3 years. Certainly his classmates were high points in my life. But I'll tell you this, I've known Demetrius now since 1985, when he entered my middle school classroom. 15, she's 37 years. Sometimes more intensely than at others. I was just thinking as we were waiting to start this, he's the finest man I've ever met.
Wow.
I'm not exaggerative here. He is the finest man I have ever met. And I know what he's thinking. Oh, shucks, Mr. Kling. No, shucks. Unequivocally, the best man I've ever met, and that includes my father. And that's saying something.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Demetrius,
Mutual admiration society here for sure.
Yeah. No, that's such a admiration, mutual admiration for both of you. I know I talked to Demetrius prior to this recording, and he had so many good things to say about you. And Demetrius, tell me about a time, and this could be as a student yourself or as a filmmaker, a time that you were in the trench and managed to call out.
Wow. Yeah, that's I think the time I could, like, one of the lowest points of my life was, it was a low, but then it was a very, very teaching moment. Well, learning, it was a learning point too, was that uh, I think it was probably like my junior year of high school. During the junior year of high school, my mom took me out of school because I was beaten by the police. They pulled me, by the school police. And so they saw me having $100, and they pulled me into the room, and they accused me of being a drug dealer, and they beat me up in front of the vice principal. And I told them that my mom gave it to me to get my brakes fixed for my car after school. And they called her and they say, yeah, your son said you gave him $100, just $100. That's it, just $100. And she said, yes, I did. And then they laughed and hung up the phone on her. She said, like, his mom sounds like she's 12, and hung up the phone and then proceeded to beat me. And so later, I mean, she was worried. My mom was hysterical, so she was worried. But anyway, eventually she took me out of the school. She just took me out. And she said, well, you can just maybe get a diploma somewhere else to go to another school, or just get your GED. And so when she took me over to some center to take the test for a GED, I passed it, like I exceeded it. And they looked at the scores and they said, wow. And they said, but, you have to be 17 to receive a GED. So you can't receive a GED. And the school refused to give my transcripts over. So that junior year, I was pretty much didn't go to school because I couldn't go to school. And I had to wait until I was 17 to go back and get my diploma or take another test. And so during that time in the west side of Chicago, I was pretty much in the streets, where it was just hanging out. Most of my friends were still in school. Some were out of school, but hanging with me, they started to come out of school. But the point that I'm trying to make, what maybe my lowest point in life, is that I knew that I was really, really out here. And I lost hope. I was just angry. I was angry because the school I went to, I felt like I was targeted. And coming from Mr. Kling's class, where 3 consecutive years of someone really caring about you, but also too, like, I wanted to please. And with the things that he taught us so much. I mean, we were in debating class. We were doing debates. He was teaching us at a college level. It was almost like he was our professor. We debated, we studied about, we learned about terrorism. We learned about, drugs, crack. I mean, in the beginning of the epidemic, I mean, the culture in Iran, I mean, the scandal. I mean, we discussed so many current event topics, and he also had us playing devil's advocate. So it was just that I understood things on a different level, more of a higher level than most people, most of my peers, once I was out in the streets. And then one day I was pulled over by the police because my music was playing too loud. And they took me to jail for that. And so I was in the jail, and I was sitting in the cell, and they kept me overnight for that, for playing music too loud. But only thing I kept hearing in my head was my mom, my uncles telling me, well, you're going to be a statistic. I thought about Mr. Kling. I saw some of my classmates that I haven't seen forever in there. And it was, I was at a place where it's like, I don't want to end up like this,
Yeah.
you know, and, uh, and at that point, at that moment, I changed. I seen things differently. I didn't, I was ready to get out, but I knew I had to get out of Chicago. And I eventually moved out of Chicago and then enrolled back into school to finish my last year of high school in my senior year. It was only like about 3 months of schooling that I needed because I had all my credits. And then the principal, the vice principal, and the counselor, they pulled me into the room and they said that, you know, originally we weren't going to accept you because you came from Chicago, and of course you have, a history with the school that you went to, you know, with your record and everything. But you don't seem like how they made you out to be. And they said that you seem obviously very intelligent. Your the tests and your grades are exceeding well, you know, like highest in the school. And they said that we want to sponsor you for a scholarship,
Wow.
you know. And yeah, so and 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 so I went to school. I started college, you know, from there. But the point is that everyone asks, how did I make it out of Chicago? How did I make it out? And is that and I always go back into the classroom. Besides my parents, it was Mr. Kling. It was the class that we took from him because he prepared us for so many things that I had no idea that I would be facing. You know, but those lessons really came in handy, and that gave me the equipment. That gave me the tactics. That gave me the skills to compete, you know, and to survive, because most of my peers, they didn't they didn't read, you know, they didn't have the knowledge, they didn't have the I was always writing, I was always reading, I was always thinking, you know, and so they didn't have those skills to fall back on when the streets let you down, when the streets have you pinned up against the wall. And so that's what you know helped me make it out. And so that's what always put in my mind that I'll have to always go back to think about those times, you know, and to thank him for that, because he gave me the gear that I needed to survive that urban jungle. And that was my trenches.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very
Well,
low point.
that kind of segues into my next question about what made you want to make a movie about Mr. Kling once you became a filmmaker, and had it been something that you'd been thinking about for many years before it actually took place?
I this wasn't going to be a movie. This was I'm my mom was a poet, you know, and I wrote poetry. I wanted to write a book. My dream was always to write a book about our story and about Mr. Kling.
Okay.
And so I think about maybe 6 to 7, maybe 6 years ago, we invited him out to Pisa, and I say, Mr. Kling, I want to write a story about it. I want to write a book about you. And Mr. Kling, he paused and he hesitated. He looked at me, he said, if anyone write a book about me, I want it to be you. You know, so I laughed and, you know, we talked and everything, but I always had it in my mind.
Yeah.
But so what happened with the film is that I wasn't a filmmaker until I made this film. And I wasn't called a filmmaker until I made this film. And so how it started is that I I have cinematography experience. I have camera experience. I love cinematography. I love the cameras. I used to own. I started some music and video recording studios for kids to keep them out of trouble. Young kids growing up like I was growing up. I put these music and recording studios in the malls so that they could come in and record and make their own videos and make and make their music, you know, for like $75, they can have a whole album, pretty much. And that kind of gave the kids something to do and get them off the streets. And also, I did it for my relatives, my nephews, and my cousins. You know, if I can draw their energy to take them out of the streets to put them into something that they would like to do, you know, it's a win-win. So I did that for many years. So I had the experiences. working with cameras and kind of directing their videos and stuff. So, and I always had a passion for creating, on the art side. So, but when it occurred, I had a tragedy in my family where my nephew, he was taken from us, from gun violence. And so it just made me pause. And I said, and he had so much talent, he had so much to give to the world. And he was also an artist that I was helping, I was producing. And so, it changed me.
Yeah.
It changed me in a sense like, well, I just seen so much talent go to waste. And I was like, he has so many things to do and he wasn't able to do it. And I say, I'm going to stop right here. I'm going to take a break from everything and I'm going to focus on everything I need to do, and just do it, So I called up Mr. Kling. I say, Mr. Kling, I would like to do a documentary on you, and he was like, okay. So I put an ad out on Craigslist and say I want to hire some videographers and some photography guys.
Okay.
I packed up my car with my film equipment that I had. I had all the film equipment, the camera equipment. And I packed up my little brother who was 16 years old. I taught him how to use the camera. And we drove to Chicago. We filmed Mr. Kling for like 4 days.
Okay.
And then we drove around the city and got B-roll and things like that. And so we put it all together from there. And then, and I just kind of, originally I just thought, my class, we always stick together. We always have these class reunions and we always meet up with Mr. Kling. And I just originally say, well, I'm going to have this as a YouTube video. We can just put it online and we can have this, and Mr. Kling can live forever. He could be immortalized, and we can have, so when someone says, how did you make it out of Chicago? We could say, here's the video,
Yeah.
And so we ended up putting in a piece this video, and my assistant Jerome, he also he helped edit the video as well. And so and I recruited him out of college. So this is just, we were just all working together, and it came out so beautiful. It came out so beautiful, and we worked and we were just we edited this video for about maybe 6 months, 6 to 8 months of just editing and just making sure. And it came out so beautiful. I'm like, wow. And so one day I was having lunch downtown, and I passed this place. It was called Twin Cities Film Festival. And I'm like, oh, what do you? So I walked in there, and it was lunchtime. I had a jogging suit on, and they say, oh, we're Twin Cities Film Festivals. We host movies, for filmmakers. I said, oh, wow. I said, okay, I have a movie. And of course, the lady looked at me like, like, okay, well, sorry, but it's over. It's a week past the deadline, so it's too late to have a film. I say, just give me 2 minutes. And I showed her the trailer of the film, of Kling. And Mr. Kling came on and he was like, I would tell you that you're going to be judged by the way you speak and by the way you write, and that's those 2 minutes. She almost like, she was pulled into my phone, right? And she was like, whoa. And then the director, he was in his office. He came out because he overheard it. He said, at first I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if I should call the police because you didn't leave. You were very persistent. But then I heard this film. Can I see the trailer again? And I showed them the trailer again. And they say, well, send us the link. And I sent them the link to the film. They say, okay, well, it's past the deadline, but we're going to try to get you in. They called me the next day, the other director, and say, yeah. And we were in, and we were nominated to one of the best films in Twin Cities.
Wow. It just kind of happened. You went into the office and
yeah, it was all divine. And so I get in there, and now I'm around all of these filmmakers.
Yeah.
And I own the IT consulting firm, so I'm come from the business computer programming side.
Yeah.
And so I'm in there, and they say, yeah, this is Demetrius, a filmmaker of Kling. And I'm like, whoa, I'm a filmmaker. And so I've been a filmmaker ever since.
Yeah. really, yeah, that kind of, that, I would say happened by accident, but they saw
Yeah,
you had quality material they really wanted to have in the festival, and the rest is history. So
yeah.
you mentioned a little bit, Demetrius, how you were connected with Mr. Kling throughout the years by reunions. But was there a period of time where you all weren't connected, and kind of how did you get reconnected those many years later, and decided to rebuild your relationship, or was there a continuous connection? How did that occur?
There was a connection because we were, see the our classroom was more like a family,
Okay.
so we grew up with each other for those 3 years. Those 3 years seemed like it was maybe 10 years to
Okay.
us. Mr. Clean I mean, he was there all over, and every one of the students he had a direct relationship with.
Okay.
So there was not any time that I remember, I would move on to Minneapolis and grow, but I would talk to Elroy or Israel, and
Mm-hmm,
Elroy and
mm-hmm,
Israel and Jamie Slack, they would keep in touch with Mr. Kling. Like, oh, you talked to Mr. Kling? Oh
mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, Mr. Kling, he helped pack us up and helped me move to New York,
Okay.
I'm like,
Okay.
whoa, we all should get together. So I don't really remember a time that, maybe like the first few years I was in Minneapolis, that we probably didn't
Okay.
talk because we were all kind of going to school and finishing college and things like that. But after college in our mid 20s, we kind of all, begin to gather back around and find each other. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so definitely, lifelong relationship with the teacher you had in middle school. It's not something
Yeah.
that really, a lot of students and teachers maintain that relationship, but really groundwork for a great documentary. And I wanted to ask both of you about just the importance of education and having teachers that make a difference, like Mr. Kling. How important is that in the upbringing of our children today?
I, I, I'd give an obvious answer. I shall. I'll just localize this to our
Yeah.
culture. We are in a state of trauma.
Yeah, yeah.
Not just now, but when I was with Demetrius and Bam, and I'm a patriot.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that to somebody today, not in the traditional sense. I want a better country while I'm still here.
Mm-hmm.
If I can't have one world with one government governing the 8 billion here, I want a better country.
Yeah.
That I call mine, right? So with all the frenzy and the trauma and this and that, I think that, a good school environment with teachers who, frankly, at some point during the lives of students, teachers who have a social agenda. And I don't mean that just for people who are marginalized. I mean a social agenda for everyone, so that all young people can understand why things now here are as they are.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, teachers can make all the difference. Maybe even more today than when I went to school. We need to be rescued. That's how I look at it. I grew up. I was a classmate of Merrick Garland, the Attorney General. Right, we were friends when I was in Lincolnwood schools. Right? I came out of this rather ideal environment. My dad was a businessman. My mom could stay home. We lived in an upper middle class community. All the benefits of the best education that were available to me, right? Yet at a very young age, I became sensitized to all of the stuff I saw, all of the disequilibrium and all that, I had incredible teachers when I was young. Not that I kept in touch with them through decades,
Mhm.
but I was brought up in a Jewish community. Lincolnwood was predominantly Jewish when I was young. I wasn't. I'm not. But the people in that school system, the administrators and the teachers, and certainly the parents, they pushed fairness. They pushed equality beyond the Jewish experience into all facets of our culture and of the people who live in it and lived in it then. I was so blessed. I didn't realize it. I figured, white privilege, who talked about that? What was that about? I was so privileged. Travel, we were always traveling, Central America, the Caribbean, Europe, my parents, my dad's from Sweden, my mom from Germany, it's like, I thought everybody had it. I thought everybody, yeah, everybody has this, right? My teachers really made an impact on me. Not all, but quite a few of them. Not so much in terms of spelling or arithmetic, because I could have grasped that on my own, either of those, right? But about a social agenda, about fairness in our country, about adhering to the ideals that we have never realized, but that we're still capable of realizing. I'm 72 in 3 weeks. I'd like to check off this planet, check out, knowing that there are better times ahead.
Yeah.
Knowing that I made a difference in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways. I'm just so dissatisfied with the society around me. Not all aspects of it, of course. Teachers make a big difference. They can. I saw that in Lincolnwood, I saw that in Lincolnwood. We discussed, a lot of the parents of my classmates were first generation Americans. They had come over, they had escaped from Europe, or they had escaped with their parents and come here, right? We spoke a lot about the Jewish experience in the world through millennia, right? But that led into black relations, brown relations, the relations of all the marginalized people in the United States. And my teachers promoted that. Again, not all, but a lot of them did. Even when I was like 4th, 5th grade, equality, parity, fairness under the law, that kind of stuff, and maybe more today than ever. We need an emphasis on those things, Yeah.
Yeah. And for people like you, that really embraced kids and pulled out the best of them and found their talents. We need more teachers like that. Demetrius, what's your take on the question of just looking at students today and how can we better prepare them for the future to leave the world in a better place than what we currently have?
Well, I think it's a tough question.
Yeah.
That's a very tough question, but I think the solution is very simple.
Yeah.
Growing up further in Minneapolis and seeing very wealthy neighborhoods
Yeah.
with very sophisticated schools. Down the street from us, there's a high school that looks like a college campus with all the books, all the computers, all the technology, all the resources that any kid would ever need. And the difference is the demographic of the neighborhood or the community. I think that we need to streamline the education, the schools, where every school, if we're all Americans and we're all under this country, right, and we are all taxpayers, but these schools should be streamlined. Where a school in Oak Park, Illinois, should be the same as school in South Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
You know, have the same resources, have the same technology, have the same opportunities available for every student. And that's how you change and you fix a whole lot of the things. You fix poverty, because I grew up on the west side of Chicago in huge poverty, you know, where people were really, you know, and education saved me, not only saved me, but it saved about 30 other of my classmates,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I talked to so many teachers that teachers in the inner city, and they all say the same things. There's no resources. There's very limited resources. These children need so much more than just education when they're coming to school hungry. They're coming from dysfunctional situations and environments where they need extra care. They don't have just the basic needs of food or personal hygiene items. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so those things need to look at, because if you could corner that, the kids are our future. You know, these kids are the ones going to be running the country. How can we compete? How can we compete against China? How could we compete against India or Eastern European countries? You know, because they're educating their whole country, you know, where we're only choosing to educate a certain segment of our population of our country,
Yeah.
So
you know,
true.
and it's
So
simple. It's a
true.
simple solution, you know, just like our military. When we go to war, when we build our army up, we don't give a small segment of our army sophisticated weapons just because of the color of the skin.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
they're going out to fight, and they're going to defend, and they're going to go and invade other countries or whatever, whatever war does. You see what I'm saying? They're equipping the entire army, the entire military with
Mhm.
sophisticated weapons.
Of
So
course.
we need to equip our kids with sophisticated education and technology and resources so we can compete, because right now we're not, and we're losing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I see it from a business standpoint, you know,
Yeah.
and I tell people, I tell my nephews, my nieces, and everyone in my family, I say, if you're making $25 an hour or under, or even $30 an hour, in 10 years, there's not going to be any jobs for you.
Mm-hmm.
They're all going to
Mm-hmm.
be replaced by computers. You're going to
Yeah.
go to McDonald's, and there's going to be one person just looking over the machines and making sure the machines operate right. You know,
Yeah.
so the only way out is education, and we're just doing a very, very poor job. This country is doing a very, very poor job uh, providing the proper education to our kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you hit it on the nail there with the funding. Government's not sending funds in the right direction necessarily, and that's been going on since,
Mhm.
you know, you and I were in grade school and before. And like you said, it's yeah, it's having equal access to resources,
Yeah,
as you mentioned, right? It's not just for the wealthy neighborhoods, or the charter schools, right? And that's
yeah.
yeah, it's really making sure that the tax money is spread evenly. Well, we've had a great discussion today. I wanted to ask you, Demetrius, where can people stream the movie? And if teachers are interested in showing Kling, would that be an appropriate film to show in middle schools or high schools?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like Mr. Kling said, you know, it's a love story. It's a love
Mhm.
story with of a teacher and the students.
Yeah.
You know, it is on available on
Mhm.
Amazon Prime movie or video, and is also available on Tubi. So if you just look up Kling, a teacher who defied the system, you
Mhm.
know, you can show the kids. I think it's really good for kids to see the movie, because you see how much of a teacher is loved by his students,
Mhm.
you know, and it shows how we connect with each other and what we've learned. And also, it also, I think it liberates the kids too, where you see it's okay to learn,
Yeah.
you know, it's okay to be smart, because we were
Mhm.
considered nerds. I mean, we were teased.
Yeah.
I can't say we were bullied, because coming from a rough neighborhood, everyone fights.
Yeah.
So we were fighting all the time, you know, and so, but it also just kind of like it shows how we prevailed.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So definitely appropriate. We had showings of this film from one of my classmates, Eric Stovall, in his school. That Mr. Kling came to speak to. So Mr. Kling, he came to speak to the students and the faculty, staff, teachers, everyone, and that was great. I was tuned in by online satellite Zoom. Yeah, so that was great. But yeah, highly encouraged. I would like every teacher in the country to watch this film. Because I realized that this is not just our story. It's not just Mr. Kling's story. It's the teacher's story. And then if you really look at it, it's a country story.
Yeah.
And Mr. Kling, he said it best. He said, "We made him proud of this country." Yeah.
Well, out of everything we talked about today on the podcast, what's one thing each of you would like listeners to remember? We'll start with you, Mr. Kling.
Regarding what we've spoken
yes,
about, right?
What would you like listeners to remember?
Sure. Geez. It's a lot of stuff, It's like we've got this dichotomy in this country more than in any other country, where you've got literally under 5% of the population controlling 80% of the wealth. Okay, it's untenable. I start there. Tom Hartman, who's, I don't know if you ever listened to him, he's on progressive radio. He wrote a book on the dysfunctionality of the United States and of everything that stems from this dichotomy of unbelievably rich and then unbelievably poor. All the things that come from it: mental illness, criminal activity, suicide, mistreatment of others, hopelessness, fear, mental illness. I think I mentioned that already. That unless we somehow build a bridge between freedom, i.e. the free market, and socialism, we have to get a middle ground there. I know that's difficult, but I think we have to work for that, because what we have going on right now with schools that are so impoverished and others that are ridiculously affluent and well funded, it ain't going to work. It's just not. I'm forgetting about mathematics. I'm forgetting about science. I'm forgetting about debating for a moment. You've got to have a larger middle ground in your culture and your society for it to function. All of this stuff, all the mass shootings and all this, I tell my friends, don't look at the individuals. Look at the system that perpetrated that. All right. The highly competitive system, right? Competitive vis-a-vis cooperative. We're so competitive. We're so ridiculously competitive. And, it's the problems here are endemic. They've been endemic since we were created as a nation. I don't think enough emphasis at all is given to the disparities between and among social groups. Once you're able to ameliorate that problem, I think other things will fall in line, and eventually you'll probably have a better society than the one we have now. But it's going to take a lot of unity. It's going to take a lot of foresight. It's going to take a lot of understanding of what this damn country has been through, what we have perpetrated upon ourselves. I'm just, I don't know. I think about Demetrius. I think about all the others in that very special group, almost divinely joined together. It was, I taught for 33 and a half years in the schools in Chicago. I had good classes pretty often. I had nothing like their class. Nothing like it. And as I said in the video, there are times when I get terribly down on myself, even at this age. I haven't been able to. Anyway, and what do I think about often when I need to elevate myself?
Yeah.
To where I actually have been for the most part. I think about them.
Mm-hmm.
I think about that group and forget about what I gave them, what they gave me.
Yeah.
As I said in the video, a sense that I was worthwhile. Young teens, teaching me what I should have known already,
mm-hmm.
that I was worthwhile and competent and required. So whatever, I just think that we've got so much work to do here. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to answer some of these questions because it's the abyss is so deep and it's so precipitous and it's like. I'll tell you this though. I'll tell you this much. I worked on the campaigns of Obama, the two of them, and I'll tell you, juxtaposing the trenches with something incredible in my life. If you would ask me what was one of the incredible things that happened to you, that November in 2008 when Obama addressed the throngs in Grant Park, Chicago. That was, though it had nothing to do with my nuclear family or anyone else in my family, that was an approach to a better future for all the world.
Yeah.
I was so emotional that night. I had a chance to go down to Grant Park. I didn't. I watched from home, and we have to move away from all the endemic racism. The racism here is, I'm sensitive to it every day. I pick up things that maybe others might not. It's so deep. No matter what politicians say about improvements in social relations, it's so deep here. And unless that's rectified, frankly, not just with Black people, brown, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what we do until we come to a point where we like here. Okay, I talk a lot. All right, sorry. I for a couple of days before police stopped me twice in one day, I had a Black Lives Matter bumper sticker on my car. That was magnetized. Okay. I knew where to use it. This is 5 years ago. I knew where to use it. Whatever, And I was here in Evanston parking my car with the bumper sticker on, Black Lives Matter. And a young Black man walked over to me. And we started to talk. And he applauded me for my enlightenment. Okay. And he ended our conversation by saying, almost verbatim, all we want to do is be valued. This is like a 15-year-old guy talking about these vast considerations. All we want to do is be valued. We want to be valued. We want to feel like we're worthwhile. And how many kids in this country don't feel that way? Intrinsically or otherwise. It's like you got to make people feel like they're important, that they matter. And when we do that, and when that time comes, because of our incredible diversity that no nation perhaps will ever match, combine the diversity and putting high value on each members of that culture, our culture. you'll see a vastly different society here. So I talk a lot there, but
no, you bring home the point there with putting just value. Yeah.
I think of my childhood. I think of the opportunities I've had without earning them, as I put in the video. I didn't earn anything. I was blessed. I was blessed to be white. In the 1950s, 60s, when I was coming up, I mean, to be white and from an affluent community, go to a good college, man, I didn't earn any of that.
Yeah.
None of it. We need parity here. We need parity in terms of how we value our peoples. And then, like I said, maybe everything else will sort of fall in line. It'll take decades. Maybe it'll never happen here. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's to be seen. I really, appreciate you sharing, your concerns, and, we do have these high points and these low points. Demetrius, what would you say is one thing you'd like listeners to remember from our conversation?
I think that I would like listeners to remember that this whole film, this project, it's all been divinely guided. It led me into a place to discovering, becoming a filmmaker, and having so much satisfaction from producing this film. It led me to I want to do more. We're writing a drama, a book off of the times that we spent with Mr. Kling.
Okay.
And perhaps turning that into a drama series. So we're working on a book for that. And we're also going to make a Kling Part 2, because when Mr. Kling left Douglas and we graduated, he went through a whole nother different series. There was a whole different series of events that happened after that, which was just as great as they were when he was teaching us. And I didn't learn all of these things until we were making a documentary. I didn't know that he was having challenges at home in his personal life with his wife and family, because of the time that he was spending with us, trying to be our teacher as well as our professor and many times parent. I didn't know that there was so many hidden hands and that he was going against when it came to the administrative staff, with the principal, well, not Douglas principal, but many of the other principals that he dealt with once he left Douglas, and I didn't know he was blackballed, having the principal's degree, and went back to school with the principal's degree, and he couldn't find a job in any public school because he was shadow banned. He was blackballed. So we didn't know that there was one student reached out to me and say, I've been looking for Mr. Kling for the last 10 years. And he sent the email. He said, and I stumbled on his name in this film, and you were tied to it. I'm not sure if you'll ever receive this email, but if you talk to Mr. Kling, I would like for you to pass a message to him. And he said that Mr. Kling changed his life. And he said Mr. Kling talked about subjects that no other teachers would dare to speak about. And so I called Mr. Kling. I'm like, what is he talking about? And Mr. Kling said, well, I was given the part to, I needed the job. And I went back to, I needed the money. My wife, Trish, left me, and I was down. He was depressed, so the principal kind of smirkingly gave him a job as heading over the library program. And he took that library program in Mr. Kling fashion and turned those 200 books that he had to, like, they probably processed 1.5 million books.
True.
And he had puppet shows that debated, and I mean, he touched so many other children's lives You know, he had his own battles with more principals, and
Uh-huh.
that's because he wanted to teach and reach, you know, more students.
Uh-huh.
And so it's like, oh, I mean, I just think he's an angel, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I just think that there's so many layers to this, and I think I found my calling. I'm doing what
Mhm.
I love what I'm doing. Before business, I love business, don't get me wrong, but this is filmmaking and making films about the education, the school system, the teachers, and Mr. Kling is so fulfilling.
Mhm.
It's peaking right now as far as
Mhm.
like the number one thing that I really want to do more of. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and I know that he's not the only one out there.
Yeah.
There's other freedom fighters. There's other teachers out there that's fighting in the trenches.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Well,
and I want to
yeah.
talk about that, and I want to see, and I want to share this message, and maybe we can start, you know, a change of thinking, you know, and a revolution with teachers, and we can change the school system and to make it better.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, for people who want to know more about your company and connect with you and follow your work, Demetrius, where can they find you online?
Well, Legacy
Mhm.
Media is online. Legacy Media film. No,
Mhm.
actually, legacymedia.com.
Mhm.
You can find us there. Um, and we also we're on Twitter as
Okay.
Legacy Media. You can follow us on Twitter as well as Instagram, Legacy
Mhm.
Media on
Okay.
Instagram.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Well, I've
Yes.
had a great time speaking with both of you on the podcast today, and I hope this makes an impact and will be a film that teachers that are listening will show in their classes and view. And I'm excited to follow your work, Demetrius, and see where this leads you. And I'm glad you found your passion. Thank you so
Yes.
much for being on the Out of the Trenches podcast, both of you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.